Her husband thought he had inherited everything after she was declared dead in labor, until her lawyer arrived. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel if you learned something from this story. The last thing Truthäll Bellamy did with her old life was mute a conference call. It was 7:41 on a February evening in room 412 of Ascension St. Thomas, Midtown, and her phone was propped against the water pitcher while a lawyer in Chicago explained, for the third time that week, why the buyers needed an answer before the end of the quarter. Between contractions, she watched the ceiling tiles and said nothing, because she had already given her answer twice. The answer was no. Bellamy Facility Group was not for sale. "You're allowed to be off the clock," said the nurse, Camille, checking the monitor strap across her belly. "Most people, this particular evening, would be off the clock." "Most people didn't build the clock," Truthäll said, and the nurse laughed, and the next contraction came up through her like weather, and she breathed through it the way the classes taught, low and slow, her eyes on the door. Rance was in the hallway. She could see a slice of him through the glass, phone to his ear, his free hand carving small, confident shapes in the air. Her husband talked with his whole body, even when no one could see him. It was one of the first things she had loved about him, back when she still mistook performance for warmth. He came in, when the call ended, all cologne and apology, and kissed her forehead. "Chicago again?" she asked. "Just putting them to bed." He pulled the chair close and took her hand, and his thumb moved over her knuckles, and for a moment he was only a man at his wife's bedside, and she let herself rest in it. "How's my girl?" "Which one?" "Both." "Ren is fine," Truthäll said. "Ren is punctual. She takes after me." They had settled the name in October, in the kitchen of the Belmead house, and Truthäll had written it on a card and stuck it to the refrigerator so it would stop being a discussion. Ren Bellamy Kilgore, a small brown bird that sings louder than its size. Rance had wanted something grander. Rance always wanted something grander. At 8:56, the contractions were 4 minutes apart. At 9:30, the anesthesiologist came and went. At 10:12, Camille looked at the monitor, then looked at it again, and her voice changed in a way that only another nurse would have caught. Truthäll caught it. She had spent 19 years in hospitals, first on her knees scrubbing operating room floors on the night shift, then walking those same corridors in a blazer with her name stitched on her crew's uniforms. She knew the sound of a floor going wrong. "What is it?" she said. Not a question. "Probably nothing. Baby's having a little dip. I'm going to get Dr. Sonoda to take a look." Then the strange thing happened, and it happened inside her. A cold came up through her chest, sudden and total, like a window thrown open in January. The room tipped. She heard herself say, "I can't breathe," and she heard how calm she sounded, and she thought, distantly, that it was just like her to be polite about dying. Truthäll, look at me." The ceiling tiles. Camille's voice going hard and fast, a speaker in the hallway saying words that emptied every other room on the floor. Rance somewhere to her left, saying her name with a question mark on it, as if she had done something confusing. Her last full thought was not of him. It was of a card on a refrigerator and a name written in her own steady hand. Then the cold closed over her head. What happened next happened without her. Amniotic fluid embolism. One of the rarest catastrophes in obstetrics, the kind young doctors read about and pray never to see. Fluid from the amniotic sac breaches the mother's bloodstream, and the body declares total war on itself. Her blood pressure fell off a cliff. Her heart stuttered, seized, stopped. The room filled in 40 seconds. Somebody's shoulder drove Rance backward through the door, and a nurse he had never seen planted herself in front of him in the corridor, not unkindly, a hand flat against his chest. "Sir, I need you to stay right here." Through the shrinking gap in the door, he saw his wife's bed drop flat, saw a resident climb halfway onto it, arms locked, driving compressions into her chest hard enough to move the whole frame. He saw a scalpel tray. He heard someone say, very clearly, "Cut, baby out now, we work mom after," and he understood they were going to open his wife on a labor bed with her heart already stopped. They delivered Ren at 10:19 p.m., blue and silent, into the hands of a team that had materialized from nowhere. 11 seconds later, from the corner of the room, came a sound like a cat, then a real cry, thin and furious, and half the people working on Tressie let out a breath without breaking rhythm. Her heart did not start. 1 minute, 2. In the corridor, Rance Kilgore stood with his back against the wall between a hand sanitizer pump and a framed print of the Cumberland River, and he could not feel his own hands. 3 minutes. A resident came out. Later, in depositions no one yet knew were coming, people would argue about exactly what Dr. Ferrell said in that hallway, because he was 30 hours into a shift, and it was his first arrest on a mother, and he would regret the sentence for the rest of his career. What he said was, "Mr. Kilgore, I'm so sorry. Her heart stopped. We couldn't get it back. They're still, I'm so sorry." And what Rance Kilgore heard was that his wife was dead. Here is what no one tells you about a moment like that. It does not arrive as one feeling. It arrives as all of them, at once in a stampede, and you do not get to choose which one reaches you first. Grief reached for him. It did. Some part of him fell down a well and kept falling. But it was not the first thing to arrive. The first thing to arrive, in the 4 minutes his wife spent dead in room 412, was a thought that came fully formed, in his own voice, calm as a man reading a term sheet. It's all mine now. The company she had refused to sell. The trust she had built with that dried-up lawyer years before she ever met him. The one with his name on nothing. The fortress she called protecting the business, and he privately called a leash. The Chicago buyers with their number that started with a 9. Every door she had ever politely closed on him swung open at once in the dark of that hallway, and Rance stood among them, 42 years old, a widower of 90 seconds, and felt, beneath the falling, something he would never confess to another living soul. He felt the floor plan of the rest of his life. Then the door banged open, and a nurse leaned out with her mask pulled down. "Dr. Ferrell, in here. We've got her back." Rance blinked. "We've got a rhythm," the nurse said to the resident, past him, through him. "Pressure's garbage, but she's back, moving to the unit." The bed came out fast, a scrum of bodies steering it, and in the middle of them was his wife, grey as newsprint, a tube down her throat, someone squeezing air into her lungs by hand. And she was alive. She was alive. And the doors at the end of the hall swallowed her whole. Dr. Sonoda found him 20 minutes later in the family room on the 4th floor. She was small and exact, and she had been doing this for 26 years, and she sat down across from him instead of standing, which he would remember. "Your wife's heart stopped for a little over 4 minutes, she said. "We restarted it. Your daughter is in the NICU, and she is doing better than we have any right to expect. I want to be honest with you about your wife. She's on a ventilator. She lost a great deal of blood, and we had to perform surgery to stop it. Her body went through a catastrophic event, and she has not woken up. She may not wake up for a long time. I need you to hear that both things are true tonight. She is alive, and she is very, very sick." Rance put his face in his hands, and his shoulders moved, and Dr. Sonoda put a hand on his arm and sat with him because she believed she was watching a man weep. His face, in his hands, was dry. Behind it, in the dark, he was looking at the floor plan. At 11:53 p.m., he stepped into the stairwell at the end of the 4th floor corridor, where the cell signal was best, and he called a number in Chicago that answered on the second ring despite the hour, because money never sleeps in any time zone. "Rance, God, we heard there was an emergency, is everything?" "She didn't make it," Rance said. The stairwell was concrete and silence. Somewhere below him a door boomed shut. "Rance, we're so sorry. We had no idea. Forget the deadline. Obviously the deal." "The deal is fine." His voice was steady. It was gentle. It was the voice he used to close. "Nothing's changed. If anything, it's simpler now." He ended the call and stood a moment in the cold stairwell light. 4 floors above him, in a unit whose ceiling she could not see, his wife's heart beat on without her permission being asked, 71 times a minute, stubborn as everything else she had ever built. Chapter 2. The widower grief, Rance Kilgore discovered, was mostly a question of wardrobe. 3 weeks after the night at St. Thomas Midtown, he stood in the closet of the Belle Meade house, choosing between 2 dark suits, and he chose the older one, because a man destroyed by loss does not look recently tailored. He skipped the pocket square. He wore the wedding ring, turned it twice at the light so the band showed wear, and practiced in the mirror the particular stillness of a man holding himself together by will alone. He had studied grief the way he studied every market before he entered it. Real grief, he had noticed at other men's funerals, was not loud. It was subtracted. So he subtracted. Less voice, less color, longer pauses before answering simple questions, as if each one had to travel a great distance to reach him. By the time he walked into the headquarters of Bellamy Facility Group on Charlotte Avenue, he was flawless. The leadership team was waiting in the conference room Tressie had named the night shift because she named her conference rooms after the things that built her. 11 people. Some of them had been with her since the used van and the borrowed floor buffer. Marisol Duarte, her operations director, sat nearest the door with a legal pad she would not write a single word on. Rance stood at the head of the table. He did not sit. He let the silence do its work first. "Most of you know Tressie collapsed the night our daughter was born," he said. "There were complications during the delivery." Her heart stopped. He paused, looked down at his hands, mastered himself. "She didn't survive it." The room made a sound he would remember with something almost like pride, because he had built it. A woman from accounting began to cry into her sleeve. A warehouse supervisor named Deshawn, 60 years old, put his fist against his mouth and stared at the table as if it had betrayed him. "There won't be a service," Rance said. "I know that's hard to hear. She was cremated privately last week. It's what she wanted. She was." And here, his voice caught, and the catch was the best work he had ever done. She was private about the things that mattered most. She'd want us focused on the company, on her people. That's the memorial she'd ask for. Marisol Duarte watched him from her seat by the door and did not cry, which she would feel guilty about for weeks, because the tears simply would not come, and she did not understand why. She had worked beside Tressie Bellamy for 9 years. She had watched her plan the company holiday party down to the brand of the folding chairs. She had once received, in her personal email at 2 a.m., a 4-paragraph memo on the correct way to load a supply van so the mop water never rode above the paper goods. That woman had left no instructions for her own death. That woman had a will for the company vans and no wishes for her own body except a private cremation nobody had ever heard her mention. Marisol swallowed it. Grief made room strange. Maybe it made facts strange too. She wrote nothing on her legal pad, and she said nothing, and she carried the wrong little note inside her, like a stone in a shoe. The company email went out at noon. The Tennessean ran the obituary 2 days later, 4 paragraphs, tasteful, listing the husband, the infant daughter, the company, and the phrase self-made where a family should have been. Across the river and across the years, 3 people read that obituary at a kitchen table in Bordeaux, in the house Tracy Bellamy had grown up in, and left at 19 with 2 garbage bags and a bus schedule. They did not read it with surprise. They had been waiting for it. Because 11 days earlier, Rance Kilgore had come to that kitchen himself, parked his German car where the whole street could inventory it, and sat down across from Truthä Bellamy with a proposal. The truth he had told them was complicated. Tracy was not dead. Tracy was in a coma she would never leave, a body on a machine, a tragedy with paperwork. And the paperwork, he said, was the problem. Years ago, some lawyer had tied up everything Tracy owned in a trust, and unless certain matters resolved in certain ways, all of it, the company, the house, the money that was practically family money, would sit behind glass forever, managed by strangers. But family, Rance had said, turning his coffee cup a quarter turn, family has standing, family has claims, a mother has claims. If we're aligned when the time comes, there's a version of this where the Bellamys finally get treated like Bellamys. He had let the sentence sit in the kitchen where Tracy had once stood at the stove as a girl. Truthä Bellamy was 64 years old, and she had spent 19 of those years explaining to Bordeaux why her daughter did not call, and the explanation had hardened from she's busy into she thinks she's better than us, into something so smooth from handling that it no longer felt like a lie. A rich daughter across town was an accusation. A rich daughter in a coma, needing family at last, family with claims, was almost a mercy. "What do you need from us?" Truthä had asked. So on the last Saturday in February, when Bellamy Facility Group held a celebration of life at Clementine Hall on Charlotte Avenue with white flowers and a photograph of Tracy from a trade magazine cover, blown up larger than she would ever have permitted, the doors opened at 2 o'clock, and at 2:20 the Bellamy family of Bordeaux walked in together for the first time in 19 years. Truthä wore black and leaned on Luttrell's arm, and her weeping was constant and dignified, and it was the first thing 400 mourners saw. Luttrell, 41, moved through the room like a hostess, accepting condolences on behalf of a sister whose phone number she did not have. She said we were so close growing up. She said we talked all the time. She collected the little squeezed hands and murmured blessings the way you collect receipts. Jared came last and stood by the wall. He was 35, the baby, the one the money had been for, though nobody had ever put it to him that way, and he had learned it late and sideways, the way you learn most true things about your own family. He held a program with his sister's face on it and did not work the room. Near the end, he found himself beside Rance at the flower table, and he asked the only question any Bellamy asked that entire afternoon that had no angle in it. "Where's she buried?" Rance's face performed sorrow. "She was cremated. It's what she wanted." "Okay," Jared said slowly. "Where's I mean? Where do I go? If I wanted to go somewhere." For a quarter of a second, the widower had no answer, because no one had asked him for a location before, and the machinery behind his eyes had to spin one up from nothing. "We're keeping her at home for now," Rance said, "until I can face deciding." Jared nodded and looked at the giant photograph of the sister he had not spoken to since he was 16, and something moved behind his face that had not been assigned to him. 2 miles away, in a bed on the 2nd floor of Select Specialty Hospital, the guest of honor breathed 12 times a minute, on a schedule a machine decided. Rance had moved her there in week 2, signing as spouse, signing as next of kin, signing until his hand cramped. On the admission paperwork, under visitation, he had written, "Restricted, immediate family only, per family's privacy wishes, all visitors through spouse." The floor staff saw grieving husbands make strange rules all the time. Nobody blinked. A respiratory therapist named Faye Dilworth got the new admission on a Tuesday night. 55 years old, 31 of them in lungs, and she treated every unconscious patient like a hostess whose party she had arrived at early. She suctioned the trach and checked the vent settings and talked the whole time, because in 31 years she had learned that nobody could prove they don't hear you. "All right, Miss Tressie," she said. "Cold out tonight. They're saying ice on the overpasses." She lifted the patient's left hand to reposition the pulse oximeter and paused. The nails were grown out ragged, but underneath the neglect, the hands were a working woman's hands, strong, scarred at 2 knuckles, and on the 3rd finger sat a wedding set that had cost more than Faye's car. Faye had seen 1,000 comatose women's hands, and she read them like charts. These hands had held mops before they held that diamond. "Somebody worked for her living," Faye said softly. "Didn't you, baby?" The monitor answered, 71, steady. At the celebration of life, the caterers were folding tablecloths when Rance walked the Bellamys out to the parking lot. Cleotha's weeping had stopped the moment the last stranger left, the way rain stops. She stood by Luttrell's car and looked up at her son-in-law with dry, arithmetic eyes and asked the question she had driven across town to ask. "So when does the money move?" And Rance Kilgore, widower of 3 weeks, looked back at the woman he had recruited and understood, with the first genuine chill of that entire performed and flawless month, that he had not acquired allies. He had acquired shareholders. Chapter 3. The Question. Corinne Ashby learned that her client was dead from a forwarded email with the subject line, "Isn't this yours?" She was 61 years old, and she had spent the first 2 months of 2026 in Chattanooga doing for her own sister what she had done for other people's families for 35 years, which was to sit in a lawyer's chair on the wrong side of the desk and learn how heavy the paperwork of a death actually is when you are the one carrying it. She had buried Dell in January. She had closed the house in February. She came home to Green Hills on the 1st of March with a car full of photo albums, and on the 2nd of March, her old paralegal sent her the obituary from the Tennessean. Tressie Bellamy Kilgore, 38, founder of Bellamy Facility Group, survived by her husband and infant daughter, self-made. Corinne read it 3 times at her kitchen counter with her coffee going cold, and the lawyer in her woke up before the grief did, because the lawyer noticed what was missing. Nobody had called her. She had drafted that trust in 2015 in a conference room she could still smell for a 27-year-old woman in a pressed uniform shirt who had arrived with 3 employees, a used van, and a manila folder of financials organized better than most public companies. Other lawyers in the building had passed on the appointment, a cleaning company. Corinne had taken the meeting as a courtesy and kept it out of respect, because 10 minutes in, the young woman across the table had said the sentence Corinne still quoted at seminars. "I don't need protecting from strangers, Miss Ashby. Strangers never had a key to my house. I need a structure that holds even if everyone I love turns out to be wrong." So they had built one. A living trust that owned every share of the company, and 2 tripwires, plain as scripture. If Tressie died, nothing moved without a certified death certificate in the trustee's hand. If Tressie was ever incapacitated, certified in writing by 2 physicians, then the successor trustee stepped in and the gates closed automatically, and the successor trustee was Corinne Ashby. The trust had been notified of nothing. The trustee had learned of her client's death from a newspaper 3 weeks late. Dead clients generate telephone calls. It is nearly the first thing that happens. Corinne pulled the Bellamy file from her fire safe and called Rance Kilgore's cell and got voicemail and got, 4 hours later, a return call in that warm sales voice she had never trusted across a single dinner table in 5 years. "Corinne, God, it's good to hear from you. I'm sorry. It's been unbearable. I should have called." "You should have called," she agreed. "I'll need the certified death certificate to open administration. Have the funeral home send it directly to my office." A pause. Exactly one beat too long. It's being processed. Corinne had stood at a counter in Chattanooga 6 weeks earlier and received her own sister's death certificate 8 days after the funeral, because in Tennessee the paper moves whether the heart can or not. Processed was not a status. Processed was a stall. "Rance," she said pleasantly, "which funeral home handled the cremation?" "Corinne, with respect, we've moved the estate work to a firm downtown. You've been wonderful to this family. You'll be hearing from them." He hung up, believing he had handled her, which told Corinne everything about how little his wife had explained to him, because you cannot fire the trustee. Only Tressie could have done that, and Tressie was past doing anything at all. The second call came Monday morning, and it changed the shape of the week. "Miss Ashby, my name is Marisol Duarte. I run operations at Bellamy. You don't know me, but Tressie gave me your name 6 years ago. She gave me an envelope. She said, if anything ever happens to me, you don't call the police, and you don't call my husband. You call Corinne Ashby first." A shaking breath. "I didn't call. She died and there was a memorial and I don't know what I was. But there's an all-hands meeting Thursday. He's selling the company, Miss Ashby. He's announcing it Thursday at 10. Corinne looked at the trust file open on her desk, at a signature made by a hand that had scrubbed floors for the right to make it. "Miss Duarte," she said, "what's the address?" The headquarters of Bellamy Facility Group sat on Charlotte Avenue, warehouse and offices under one roof, and on Thursday at 10, the floor had been cleared and 300 folding chairs set out facing a portable stage. On the screen behind the stage, a slide read, "Securing what she built." Rance wore the older suit again. "Tressie used to say this company was never about buildings," he told them. "It was about the 300 families in this room, and the last thing I can do for her is make sure those families are secure forever." He let the pause work. "I've reached an agreement in principle with Halloran Equity Partners of Chicago. Every job protected, every pension funded. It's what she would have—" "Where is the death certificate, Mr. Kilgore?" The voice came from the back, from the loading dock end of the floor, and it was not loud, and it carried the way frost carries. 300 heads turned. A small silver-haired woman in a grey suit stood in the center aisle with a leather portfolio under one arm, and she did not move toward the stage because she did not need to. Marisol Duarte stood by the dock door with her arms folded and her chin level, having opened it herself. "I'm sorry, this is a private company meeting," Rance began. "My name is Corinne Ashby. I'm the attorney who built the Bellamy Trust, and under its terms I am its trustee. Every share of this company sits inside that trust, which means, Mr. Kilgore, that you are describing the sale of property you do not control to 300 people whose futures depend on it. So I'll ask again, and then I'll leave you to your meeting." She opened the portfolio without hurry. "Tennessee law does not permit the cremation of a human being without a permit, and does not issue a permit without a certificate of death. You announced a cremation 3 weeks ago. Where is the certificate?" "This is a legal matter and I won't—" "It is a 5-second matter," Corinne said. "Dead women generate paper, Mr. Kilgore. Within days. Automatically. I received my own sister's certificate in 8. She looked briefly at the rows of folding chairs, at Deshawn from the warehouse, at the woman from accounting, at all the faces that had cleaned this city's hospitals through 2 decades of night shifts. "Until that paper is in my hand, not one share of Bellamy Facility Group moves anywhere. Not to Chicago. Not to anyone. That is not a threat. It is the sentence your wife paid me to write 11 years ago." She closed the portfolio. "She was 27, Corinne added, to the room now, not to him. "She sat across from me with 3 employees and a used van, and she planned for this exact morning. Whatever else you hear today, hear that. She never once left her people unprotected." Then she walked out through the loading dock the way she had come, past Marisol Duarte, who had begun, finally 3 weeks late, to cry. On the stage, Rance Kilgore smiled a small, sorrowful smile for the room and said something graceful about lawyers and grief and process, and nearly all of them believed him because he was very good. But not all of them. A room is never all of anything afterward. Corinne spent Friday morning at a counter of the Tennessee Office of Vital Records with a request form and 35 years of knowing exactly what to ask for. She was the trustee of the Decedents Trust. She was entitled. The clerk ran the search twice. There was no record of death for Tressie Bellamy Kilgore. Not in Davidson County. Not in the state of Tennessee. Not pending, not processing, not amended, not sealed. Nothing. Corinne walked out into the March cold and sat in her car in the parking lot for a long time without turning the key. 35 years of estates had taught her that families lie about money, lie about love, lie about who was in the room at the end. But the paper never has a reason to lie, and the paper was not saying that a death had been recorded badly. The paper was saying no death had occurred. There was no certificate, because no hospital had pronounced her. There was no cremation, because there was no body to burn. There was a husband announcing a sale, a memorial with a photograph instead of a casket, a private cremation nobody could name a funeral home for, and somewhere on the other side of all that theatre, generating no paper at all, was a living woman. He was not hiding a death badly, Corinne thought, and felt the cold arrive in her chest at last, and it was not grief. He was hiding a life well. She started the car. Then, before pulling out, she took the portfolio from the passenger seat, found the trust's incapacity clause, and read it once more, though she had written it herself and could recite it from memory. 2 physicians, certification in writing, and then the gates close and the fortress belongs to its architect. "Hold on, Tressie," she said to the empty car. "I'm going to find where he put you." Chapter 4. Perfection is the tell. The call from Chicago came Monday at 7:04 a.m. before Rance had finished his coffee, which was how Gil Prentice of Halloran Equity Partners let people know he was unhappy. "Rance, our counsel spent the weekend on your trustee situation." "There is no situation. There's a retired lawyer having a hard time letting go of a dead client." "Our counsel says a trustee who controls 100% of the shares isn't a hard time, Rance. She's the counterparty, and she stood up in front of your entire workforce and said the shares don't move." A pause with money in it. "Halloran doesn't buy lawsuits. You have a filing problem, a paper problem, and now you have a calendar problem because my partners gave me until the end of Q2. Fix your paper." Rance set the phone down gently on the marble island of the Belmead kitchen, and from the next room came the sound of his daughter crying and his mother beginning to sing to her, and he stood very still in the middle of the life he had told Chicago was simpler now. He had told himself in the beginning that the lie required no maintenance. She would drift away quietly on her machines, the way the doctors' faces had promised, without their mouths saying it, and the lie would ripen into the truth on its own schedule, and no one would ever need to audit the gap between them. That was the plan. The plan had assumed a coma, a closing, and a funeral, in that order. The plan had not assumed Corinne Ashby coming home from Chattanooga. He went to the safe in the study and took out the folder he had hoped not to need, and understood that from this morning forward, the lie was no longer a story he had told. It was a property he had to defend. Corinne Ashby's office in Green Hills had one client chair, because at this stage of her career she saw one client at a time, or none at all. On Wednesday, Rance Kilgore sat in it, unaccompanied, no downtown firm, no briefcase, just a single document in a clear sleeve, which he laid on her desk the way a man lays down a winning hand he is too gracious to enjoy. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You blindsided me Thursday, and I got defensive, and that's on me. The truth is, I assumed your role ended 2 years ago. I assumed someone had told you." Corinne put on her glasses and did not touch the document. First Amendment and Restatement of the Bellamy Trust, dated March 12, 2024. Removing Corinne Ashby as successor trustee. Appointing in her place the settler's spouse, Rance Kilgore. Signed, Tressie Bellamy Kilgore. Notarized in Williamson County by a notary whose stamp was crisp and current and real. She wanted her husband in that seat, Rance said quietly. You built the fortress, Corinne, and she was grateful every day of her life, but she got married. Fortresses get new keys. Corinne read it twice. Then she did something Rance did not expect. She slid open her desk drawer, removed the original 2015 trust, and set the two signatures side by side under the lamp, and looked at them for a long, unhurried minute, while he watched her, the way a salesman watches a customer with the pen already in her hand. The signatures matched. That was the problem. Mr. Kilgore, she said at last, I've been reading this woman's signature for 11 years, on amendments, on deeds, on Christmas cards. Would you like to know what 11 years teaches you? No one signs their own name the same way twice. It drifts, it hurries, it has bad days. A signature is a heartbeat, not a stamp. She removed her glasses. This one is perfect. It sits on this page exactly, and I mean exactly, the way it sits on a document I have in my safe. Signatures can be perfect, Mr. Kilgore. Perfection is the tell. The salesman's face did the smallest possible thing, a flicker at the outer edge of the left eye, and Corinne filed it away with the rest of the evidence she could not yet prove. That's an ugly accusation to make against a grieving man, Rance said softly. I haven't made one. I've made an observation about penmanship. She slid the document back across the desk. Keep your copy. Mine arrives by subpoena, along with the notary, her journal, and her calendar for March 12, 2024. I filed in Davidson County this morning to confirm the trusteeship. You'll be served by Friday. She stood, ending the meeting in her own office, as was her right. One more thing. Whichever chair either of us ends up in, the trustee has a duty to the beneficiary. The beneficiary is Tressie. So, as an officer of this trust, I'm asking you a question on the record, and I'd think carefully. Where is she? She's gone, Corinne. Where is she, Mr. Kilgore? Grief counselors say the ashes question is really a question about our own. Get out of my office, Corinne said, without raising her voice at all. The hunt took her the rest of the week, and the week defeated her. She called Ascension St. Thomas Midtown, where the obituary said it ended, and learned what any lawyer knows and every family forgets, which is that a hospital will not confirm to a stranger on a telephone that a patient exists, let alone where a patient went. She called the 11 long-term care facilities in Davidson County, then the 14 in the counties touching it, and got the same courteous wall 25 times. No patient by that name, which meant no patient by that name, or a patient flagged private at a husband's request, and the wall was built precisely so that no caller could ever learn which. She subpoenaed the hospital's discharge records through the new case, and was told, correctly, that production would take 30 to 60 days. 60 days. Chicago's quarter ended in 90. On Friday night, Corinne Ashby sat in her kitchen with her sister's photo album still stacked by the door and admitted to the empty house that she had every advantage the law could give a person, and the law was slow, and somewhere within an hour of her kitchen, a woman was lying in a bed, generating no paper at all, and Corinne could not find her. "Where did he put you, baby?" she said to the albums, to the window, to nobody. The answer was 2.8 miles from the office, where Rance had laid down his perfect signature, on the second floor of Select Specialty Hospital, in a room where the only visitor who came anymore got paid to. Faye Dilworth had noticed it the way she noticed everything, gradually and then all at once. She pulled the visitor log at the nurse's station on a slow Tuesday, out of no authority except 31 years of minding other people's business for their own good, and read it like a chart. Husband, twice in the first week of March. Husband, once the second week, 4 minutes, on his phone at the bedside the entire time. She remembered it because he had taken the call standing with his back to the bed. Then, nothing. 19 days of nothing. 19 days that happened to begin, though Faye had no way of knowing it, the same week a small, silver-haired lawyer stood up at an all-hands meeting on Charlotte Avenue and froze every dollar he had counted on. "Immediate family only," Faye said to the log, "per family's privacy wishes," and looked down the hall toward 214, where the family's privacy wishes lay on a ventilator schedule with nobody wishing anything for her at all. That was the week Faye started the whiteboard. Every facility room had one, meant for the date and the nurse's name and mostly ignored. Faye began writing on it each shift she had her, in big letters, the way you'd set a table for somebody expected home. Tuesday, March 24th, cold, sunny. Your nurse is Faye. Your lungs sound strong today. She could not have said exactly why she did it. 31 years had taught her that a person coming up from the deep needs something to grab, and a date is a handhold, and nobody could prove Miss Tressie wasn't reading it. "All right, sugar," she said on the last night of March, suctioning the trach, checking the settings, moving the strong, scarred left hand to reset the oximeter clip. "Let me tell you what your board says today. It says Tuesday, March 31st. It says rain coming. It says your nurse is Faye, which is the only part that never changes, because I keep requesting you. You've got good numbers and good hands, and I have got—" She settled the hand back on the blanket. "Absolutely no one else on this floor worth talking to." She was turning to chart when she said it, the little joke she always closed with, thrown over her shoulder like salt. "Squeeze my hand if you're tired of my mouth." She said it every shift. It was the punchline to a conversation with the deep. She had already let go of the hand. The fingers closed on hers. Faye Dilworth stood absolutely still in room 214, with her heart going like a girl's. Left hand, a grip, weak as a kitten and unmistakable as thunder, 5 fingers folding down on purpose around her own. "Miss Tressie," she said very quietly, very steadily, "the way you talk near a bird you don't want to startle. Miss Tressie, if you can hear Faye, do that one more time." Under the lids, the eyes were moving. The hand squeezed again. Chapter 5. What the board says. Coming back was not like waking. Waking has a door. This had fathoms. There was a long country of sound first, voices arriving like weather from another county, and a rhythm underneath everything, a soft mechanical tide that she would understand much later had been breathing for her. There was weight. Her own body lay on her like something that had been delivered to the wrong address. And there was, at intervals, a voice. The voice talked about rain. It talked about lungs. It called her sugar and Miss Tressie and baby, and it kept telling her what day it was. Over and over, patiently, the way you leave a porch light on. Some fathomless while later, when the dark had thinned to grey, the voice put something warm inside her left hand and asked her a question. And Tressie Bellamy did the first thing she had done on purpose in 53 days. She held on. After that, the climb. It was April by the time her eyes stayed open and tracked. It was April when the neurologist held up 2 fingers and she blinked twice. And the room got loud, and somebody laughed, and somebody else said, "Page Dr. Okafor, she's following commands." It was late April when they began weaning her from the ventilator in stretches, an hour, then 3, her body remembering the oldest job it had. The trach stayed. Her voice stayed on the other side of it, locked in a room she could see into, but not enter. Her right hand would not answer her. Her whole right side came back slow and sullen, like a crew that had been told the company folded. But the left hand worked, and the eyes worked, and behind the eyes, waking up last and then all at once, was the thing that had built Bellamy Facility Group out of a mop bucket. The mind came back inventorying. She could not speak, so she watched. And nobody in the building understood yet how much watching she was doing. She read the whiteboard. Thursday, April 23rd. Warm. Your nurse today is Bria. Faye back tonight. She read the tape on her IV lines and the name of the facility on a badge, Select Specialty, and thought, I know this building. My crews bid this building in 2019. She counted the ceiling tiles. She counted the days between the dates on the board. It was the dates that broke her first, before anyone told her anything at all. She had gone into room 412 at St. Thomas on a February evening, with a name taped to her refrigerator, and the board on the wall said April, and no amount of staring made it say anything else. Somewhere between one contraction and this ceiling, a season had been taken off her books. She did the arithmetic the way she did all arithmetic, without flinching, and the arithmetic said, your daughter has been alive for 2 months, and you were not there for 1 hour of it. She could not find the number she needed most after that, the only number left that mattered, and she had no voice to ask with, until the night Faye came back on shift and saw her patient looking at her, really looking, present as a lit window, and pulled a chair close and took the left hand in both of hers. There you are, Faye said, been holding your spot. Tressie's lips moved around the tube. No sound. Faye was already reaching for the whiteboard, wiping the date away with her sleeve, uncapping the marker, fitting it into the left hand that had signed nothing in months. The letters came out drunk and enormous, a child's letters, and cost her more effort than any contract of her life. Baby Faye had read the admission summary weeks ago, the history that travels with a body, 38-year-old female, postpartum day 2 at transfer, cardiac arrest during delivery. She had 31 years of choosing her sentences at bedsides, and she chose these with her whole heart. Your baby made it, honey, a girl. Born the same night everything happened to you, and she made it. That's what your chart says, and charts don't lie about that part. She squeezed the hand. That much I know for stone certain. Tressie Bellamy began to cry, silently, around a tube, her shoulders shaking, her left hand gripping Faye's like a woman gone overboard, and Faye held on and let her, because there is nothing to fix about that kind of weeping, and only a fool would try. Then the marker moved again. Slower. Worse. Name? Faye looked at the wobbling word for a long moment. I don't know her name, baby, she said softly. It's not in anything I can see. And she watched her patient absorb it, watched a mother somewhere inside there understand that she did not know her own daughter's name, and Faye Dilworth decided privately, in room 214, that whoever had arranged this woman's silence had made an enemy of exactly the wrong respiratory therapist. The facility notified the spouse the same week as the rules required. Emerging from disorder of consciousness, following commands, communicating by writing. Rance took the call in his car outside a restaurant on 12th Avenue South and sat afterward with both hands on the wheel for a long time, doing what he always did with catastrophe, which was arithmetic. He came on a Sunday afternoon, when Faye was off. He came with flowers, and he looked wonderful, and grief had made him leaner in a way that photographed well. And when he stopped in the doorway of 214 and looked at his wife, awake, propped up, watching him come, whatever crossed his face, crossed it fast and left no tracks. Hey you, he said gently, and pulled the chair close and took her left hand, and she let him because she was inventorying. They told me you're back. I've been here every week, you know, talking to you, praying. He smiled at her, damp-eyed, tender, and Tressie thought about the whiteboard dates she had counted, and said nothing, because she could say nothing, and watched him mistake her silence for weakness, which people had been doing profitably her whole life. Other people's profit. There's a lot to catch you up on, and the doctors say not to flood you, so I'll keep it simple. He rubbed his thumb across her knuckles. Ren is perfect. 10 pounds now. My mother's with her around the clock, and she is safe, and she is loved. Ren. The name landed in her like warm water. He gave it to her the way he gave everything, as a demonstration of what he controlled. Now the hard part, and I need you to just listen because you're not strong enough to do anything else, and honestly, sweetheart, that's a mercy." He leaned in. His voice stayed soft the entire time. That was the part she would remember, that it never once stopped being soft. "The night Ren was born, your heart stopped. They told me you were gone. And I made decisions in that fire, and some of them can't be unmade gracefully. The world thinks you died, Tressie. Your company held your memorial, your obituary ran. There are 300 people who cried for you, and a buyer in Chicago, and a story that is already finished." A pause. "Bringing you back into it is not like turning on a light. It's complicated, legally, financially. There are 2 ways it goes." He straightened her blanket, unhurried. A man tidying. "The gentle way, you sign some things when your hand is ready. We settle everything quietly, generously, and you recover somewhere beautiful. And when you're strong, if you're ever strong, we talk about visits with Ren." Supervised at first, reasonable. Her eyes did not leave his face. "The other way, you fight me. And I want you to see that road clearly, because I love you too much to let you walk it blind. You can't stand up, Tressie. You can't talk. You can't sign your own name. You've got a documented brain injury and months of confusion in your chart. And I have a healthy baby, a home, my mother, and every lawyer that money can polish. Your family is with me. Your own mother, Tressie. So you tell me." Soft. Soft the whole way down. "Who does a judge give Ren to?" He stood, kissed her forehead the way he had in room 412 a lifetime ago, and set the flowers where she could see them. "You don't have to decide anything today. Rest, I'll come Sunday." At the door he paused and gave her the smile that had closed 100 rooms. "It's good to have you back, sweetheart. Whatever version of back this is." The door sighed shut. Tressie Bellamy lay in the bed that breathed with her now instead of for her, and looked at the ceiling tiles she had counted, 48 of them, and did not cry. She had been 19 once, standing on Lichet Avenue with 2 garbage bags, listening to a door lock behind her, and she had learned on that sidewalk the only lesson that ever stuck. Nobody was coming. Whatever got built, she would build with the hands she had. One of those hands still worked. When the evening aid came at 7, the patient in 214 was awake and waiting, and she gestured left-handed, precise at the whiteboard, and the aide fitted the marker into her grip and held the board steady. The letters came out slow, enormous, unmistakable. Not help. She had written that word for the last time at 19, in a language nobody answered. The board said, Corrine. Chapter 6. 21 days. The phone in the Green Hills office rang at 9:20 on a Tuesday morning, and Corinne Ashby answered it herself, because at this stage of her career there was no one else to. "Miss Ashby, my name is Faye Dilworth. You don't know me. I'm a respiratory therapist at Select Specialty Hospital on the West Side, and I have got a patient who has been through something I don't fully understand. And last night she wrote a name on her whiteboard, and the name was yours." Corinne stood up from her desk without knowing she had done it. "Describe her," she said. 38, strong hands, came to us in February on a vent. Husband signed everything. Nobody's visited her in weeks. She woke up, Mom. She's been awake and climbing for a month, and she is sharp as a tack and mad as a hornet, and the first full word she ever wrote me was baby, and the last one was you." "What room?" 214. "Miss Ashby, I could get in a world of trouble for this call." "No, Miss Dilworth," Corinne said, already reaching for her keys. "For the portfolio, for the binder that had waited in the fire safe through a memorial, a frozen sale, and a forged page. You could get in a world of trouble for not making it. There's a difference, and I will stand in front of anybody in Tennessee and explain it. I'm 20 minutes out. The front desk took 11 of those minutes back. I'm sorry, ma'am. This patient's visitation is restricted. Immediate family only, all visitors through the spouse." "The patient," Corinne said, "is awake and communicating. which means the patient decides who visits the patient. That restriction was written by a husband over an unconscious woman, and it died the morning she opened her eyes. You may confirm that with her directly, which is exactly what the law would like you to do." The administrator was summoned. The administrator walked down to 214 with a clipboard and came back 4 minutes later, looking like a man who had just been examined by something with better posture than his lawyers. "She wrote it twice," he said. "Let her in." Corinne Ashby had delivered hard news in hospital rooms for 35 years, and she had trained her face for all of it, and every bit of that training failed her in the doorway of room 214. The woman in the bed had lost 30 pounds and 4 months in the use of her right side. There was a tube at her throat and a season of fluorescent light in her skin. But the eyes that found Corinne across the room were the same eyes that had sat across a conference table in 2015 and said strangers never had a key to my house, and they were doing now exactly what they had done then. They were taking inventory. "Well," Corinne said when she could, "you're a hard woman to get a meeting with." Tressie's face broke open, halfway between weeping and the crooked left-sided thing that was all the smile her body currently sold, and she lifted her working hand off the blanket, and Corinne crossed the room and took it, and the two of them stayed like that for a while, architect and fortress, neither one willing to be the first to let go. Then Corinne pulled the chair close and set the binder on the blanket where Tressie could see the spine, the original 2015, the navy cover gone soft at the corners. "You built this for exactly this day," Corinne said. "I want you to hear that before you hear anything else. 11 years ago you sat in my office, 27 years old, and planned for the morning everyone you loved turned out to be wrong. That morning came, and the fortress held Tressie. He has not moved one share, one deed, $1. Everything you built is exactly where you left it, locked, with my name on the gate, because your name put it there." The marker was already moving. Ren, with his mother, healthy by every account. "I have eyes on that situation and we are going to talk about it today, I promise you. Business second, baby first, I know the order." Saw her. Not yet. Corinne held the look that came back at her, held it without flinching, because this woman deserved a lawyer who did not blink. "Not yet. That is the war, and I won't pretend it's a small one." The marker again, slower. He said, "World thinks I died." "The world does. He announced it, he ran your obituary, he held your memorial at Clementine Hall with a photograph the size of a garage door, and your family sat in the front row." Corinne watched that land, watched the left hand go still on the board, and then he tried to sell your company with your body still warm 2 miles from the podium, and that, Tressie, is where he made his mistake, because selling required paper and paper required me. She told it all, in order, without softening. The missing certificate, the cremation that could not have happened, the all hands. The amendment dated March 12, 2024, with its flawless signature. The marker came up off the board like a struck match. Not mine. "I know it's not yours. I knew in the first minute. A forensic document examiner in Atlanta has both originals now, and he is slow and expensive and never wrong. What I need from you is patience while he—" The marker was already moving again, and what it wrote was not patience. What did he trace it from? Corinne Ashby sat back in the chair and looked at her client for a long moment, at the ruined body and the undamaged mind coming off the board in block capitals, and felt something she had not felt since Chattanooga, which was the presence of family. "There you are," she said quietly. "That is the right question, and I've asked it too, and when the examiner answers it, we'll have him. Signatures come from somewhere, Tressie. Perfect ones come from documents. They were still working when the process server found the room. He was apologetic about it. They always were with the sick ones. A manila envelope laid on the blanket next to the binder like a rock thrown into a garden. Corinne opened it because the right hand couldn't, and read it once fast and once slow, And when she looked up, her courtroom face had come back on, which told Tracy everything before a word did. "It's not from Rance," Corinne said. "It's from your sister. In re the conservatorship of Tracy Bellamy Kilgore, filed in the probate division of the 7th Circuit Court, Davidson County. Petitioner, Latrell Bellamy, sister of the respondent, seeking emergency appointment as conservator of the person and property on grounds of incapacity." Attached and quoted page after page was Tracy's own medical chart from March and April. The fog of her surfacing served back to her as evidence. Patient disoriented, patient unable to follow commands, patient does not know the year. "They've taken the worst weeks of your life," Corinne said, "and filed them as your permanent condition. It's ugly, it's clever, and it has his fingerprints all over the drafting because your sister did not find this law firm in the church bulletin." She turned to the last page and went very still. "Hearing's been set. Emergency docket." The marker went 21 days. Faye Dilworth, changing the humidification setup and pretending magnificently not to listen, stopped pretending. 21 days for what, exactly?" she said. "What do they have to see in 21 days?" "A judge has to see capacity," Corinne said. "Not charts, not lawyers, her. They will put her in a room and watch whether she can understand, decide and communicate, and the petition is betting everything that she can't. And there's a second bet under the first one." She looked at Tracy because the woman had earned the whole truth at every step so far. "Conservators control custody questions. If Latrell wins, your sister decides when you see Wren, which means Rance decides. That's what this filing is. It's not about your money. Your money is locked. It's about making sure the door to your daughter has their hand on it." The room was quiet, except for the machines doing their patient percentages. Tracy Bellamy looked down the bed at her own body, at the right side that answered nothing, at legs that had not held her weight since a February evening in another building. And she did the count every builder does before every job, materials against deadline, honestly, without mercy. 21 days. She had a voice locked behind a tube, a signature she could not produce, a right hand on strike, and she could not stand up. Not for 1 second, not with 3 people helping. The marker moved one more time before the evening meds, and Faye read it over Corinne's shoulder, and neither woman said anything for a moment because there was nothing to add. The board said, "PT tomorrow, 5 a.m. Chapter 7, Relearning Her Name." The therapy gym at Select Specialty opened at 7. For 18 days, it opened at 5. Nobody advertised the arrangement. The day staff was not available at that hour, so it was a therapist named Ito, and an aide, and Faye when her shifts allowed, and a 38-year-old woman strapped upright in a standing frame, with sweat running into the collar of her gown, relearning a conversation with gravity that she had been having since she was 10 months old and lost in a single February night. The body keeps honest books. That was the thing nobody warned you about. Every minute upright was paid for in full. No credit, no discounts for having built a company, no partial payment accepted for having once mopped 4 operating rooms a night for 9 years. The standing frame did not care who she was. In its way, it was the first honest opponent she'd faced all year. She stood 40 seconds the first morning. She wept afterward from pain, alone, on purpose, having asked Ito to step out because she had a rule as old as Lishi Avenue about who got to watch. She stood 4 minutes on day 9. The speaking valve came on day 11, a small purple piece of plastic that a respiratory therapist fitted to the track, while the whole room pretended it was routine, and Faye Dilworth stood by the bed with her arms folded tight because her hands were not to be trusted. "Take your time," the speech therapist said. "Exhale and let it come." The first sound was air. The second was wreckage. The third was a word, cracked in half and dragged over gravel, unrecognizable as her voice and unmistakable in every other way. Ren. Faye turned and faced the supply cart and did some entirely necessary reorganizing of the supply cart. The second thing Truthäll Bellamy ever said, an hour later, when Corinne arrived and stopped dead in the doorway at the sound of her client saying her name out loud, was this: "Corinne, sit down. We have 11 days, and I talk slow now, so nobody interrupt me." Recovery did not run on montage time, so they worked the days like a job site, in trades. Mornings were the body, the frame, then the parallel bars. Then, on day 15, 3 steps between the bars, with Ito's hands hovering at her waist like a spotter's, each step a full sentence her legs had to compose from scratch. Afternoons were the hand. The right one was returning the way spring returns to a north-facing yard, late and patchy, and it needed a job, so Corinne gave it the most important one. Capacity would be measured partly in ink. A conservatorship evaluation would ask her to write, to sign, to demonstrate that the person who owned the name could still produce it. So every afternoon a legal pad and the pen fitted into fingers that shook like a first-day trainee, and her own name, over and over, a woman signing her way back into existence, one ugly line at a time. Truthäll Bellamy, Truthäll Bellamy, Truthäll Bellamy. "You know what's funny?" she rasped on one of those afternoons, flexing the cramp out of the hand. "I gave a whole speech once, Chamber of Commerce. Told them the most valuable thing I ever built was the company." She looked at the wobbling signatures marching down the pad. It was this. It was always just this. He knew it before I did. It's the one thing he bothered to steal. Evenings, when the building went quiet, she told Faye and sometimes Corinne the parts of the story that were not in any chart, because the talking was therapy too, the voice getting stronger on the only fuel that never ran out, which was the truth. She told them about being 19, about the savings account her grandmother had fed for 16 years, cleaning woman money, folded bills deposited every Friday, $12,000 with Truthäll's name on it, and college taped to it like a label. About coming home from her shift to learn that her mother had drained it to the last dollar for Jared's bond, and Jared's lawyer, and Jared's fresh start, 16 years of her grandmother's Fridays gone, in one afternoon, and about what her mother said when Truthäll stood in the kitchen holding the empty passbook. She said, "You'll be fine. You're the strong one." Truthäll's ruined voice made the sentence sound like what it was, a door locking. In that house, strong was just the word for the one who doesn't get kept. I was on Lishi Avenue with 2 garbage bags by 9 o'clock. My grandmother died the next spring. She never knew the account was empty. That's the only mercy anybody in my family ever performed, and they performed it by accident. "And the trust," Corinne said quietly. "In 2015, you never told me why the incapacity clause. Clients your age never ask for it. You demanded it." "Because I already knew what my people do to a woman who can't guard her own accounts." Truthäll looked at her gaunt, upright in the chair, unbroken. "I just always figured the woman would be my grandmother's age when it happened, not 38, not from the inside of my own house." The family came on day 16. They came at 2 on a Thursday with a coconut cake and a stranger, a soft-voiced man Luttrell introduced as a family elder care consultant, who set a leather folio on his knee and clicked his pen the way other men cock things. Truthäll received them sitting up in the chair, dressed, hair wrapped, the whiteboard wiped clean and retired, and asked Ito to stay and chart, which was her right as the patient, and which made the consultant's pen click twice. "Baby, you look wonderful," Cleotha said. "Doesn't she look wonderful? We have been so worried, visiting all those weeks when you didn't know anybody. Nobody visited me, Mama." The voice was gravel, and it did not hurry. "The log at the front desk records every entry to this floor. It shows rants 3 times in February and March and then nothing. It shows the Bellamy family never. You are welcome to keep talking, but you should know the building writes things down. It's why I like it here. Luttrell tried next, sugar first, the consultant's pen hovering. We just have some questions, because we love you. Do you know today's date, sweetie? Do you remember signing your trust papers? Sometimes people remember things that didn't. Thursday, June 25th, 2026. I signed the Bellamy Trust on September 9th, 2015, at 4 p.m. in the offices of Ashby & Associates in Green Hills, witnessed by a notary named Grover, whose stamp expired in 2019, which I know because I checked it, because I check things, which is how I own a company, and you are borrowing a lawyer. She turned to the consultant. Write faster. She'll want it all. The consultant did not stay the full visit. The cake did. Luttrell left last, pausing at the door for the exit line she'd rehearsed. We only want what's best for you, Tressie. You want what's mine, Tressie said. Best and mine were never the same word in that house. But it was Jared, hanging back in the corridor after the women had gone, who left the mark that day. He stood in the doorway of 214, 35 years old, holding his ball cap, not coming in, and when he finally spoke, he was looking at the floor tiles her crews used to strip and wax. At the memorial, he said, I asked him where you were buried. He didn't have an answer, Tress. A man buries his wife, he knows where. He had to make something up right in front of me, and I watched him make it up, and I went home, and I didn't say nothing to nobody. His thumb worked the brim of the cap. I keep thinking about the college money, how everybody just needed it to be fine. It wasn't fine. I was 16 and I knew it wasn't fine. He put the cap on. I'm not asking you for anything. I just needed to say it in the building where you could hear it. He was gone before she could answer, which was as well, because she had no idea what her answer was, and would not for some time. That evening, Corinne came with the day's war report, the examiner in Atlanta requesting exemplar documents, Halloran's lawyers circling the frozen shares, the hearing now 5 days out, and found her client staring at the ceiling, working something the way she worked everything silently, to the bone. He announced a cremation, Tressie said. First week of March. Told my whole company. Told the newspaper. He did. Tennessee doesn't burn a body on a man's word, Corinne. There's a permit. Signed by a medical examiner, filed by a funeral home before anybody strikes a match. It's a document, it lives in a drawer, and either it exists or it doesn't. She turned her head on the pillow, and in the lamplight her eyes were 19 and 38 at once. Subpoena the crematory records, every funeral home and crematory in Davidson County. He didn't just lie about my death. He published a lie he can't paper, and I want the empty drawer entered as evidence. Make him hand the court the proof that he knew. Corinne Ashby looked at her for a moment, then took out her phone and at 8:40 on a Thursday night called her process server at home. It's Corinne, she said. Clear your Monday. We're going to every funeral home in the county. A pause. No, looking for something that isn't there. Chapter 8. The Cost of a Daughter. He came on Sunday unannounced, and he came carrying a car seat. Tressie heard the voice at the nurse's station first, the warm salesman's register that carried down any corridor it entered, and she knew it the way you know weather, and she was reaching for the call button when the door of 214 swung open and Rance Kilgore walked in with their daughter. Everything in the room stopped, except the machines. Wren was 5 months old. She was asleep, fists up by her ears like a tiny boxer between rounds, in a yellow cotton outfit somebody with money and no imagination had bought, and she had Tressie's grandmother's chin, unmistakably, ridiculously, the chin travelling down the century like a signature no one could trace, and Tressie Bellamy's whole body turned toward her child, the way plants turn, without permission, without strategy, without one single thought about doors or courts or wars. I've been doing some reflecting, Rance said. Whatever's between us, she shouldn't be the casualty. A girl should know her mother. He set the carrier on the bed's edge, worked the buckles. "You want to hold her?" It was a trap. Tressie knew it was a trap the way she knew load-bearing walls, structurally, at a glance, and she watched her own arms rise anyway, the strong left and the trembling right, because there are traps the body walks into with its eyes open and calls the price fair. He laid the baby in her arms. 22 weeks. That was the size of the theft, counted one way. Counted another way it was, first bath, first smile, first fever, first snow, 154 mornings of a face changing by the day, all of it spent by other people like money from an account she hadn't known was open. Wren's weight settled into the crook of her left arm, impossibly dense, the specific gravity of a sleeping child that no one had ever once described to her correctly, and the baby stirred and frowned her grandmother's frown and gripped Tressie's finger without waking. The grip undid her. She had held on to a stranger's hand in the dark for 53 days and called it survival. Her daughter did it in her sleep. Tressie bent her face to the small hot head and breathed her in, and for 4 minutes, the length of a death, the length of everything. There was no company, no petition, no Belle Meade, no Chicago, no Bordeaux. There was a chin, traveling down the century. There was a weight in her working arm, exactly where the future goes. She was memorizing the face when the shadow crossed it. "Okay," Rance said gently, "she'll want feeding." His hands came down and took the baby up out of her arms with the smooth, entitled ease of a man retrieving his coat. And the cold that rushed into the space where the weight had been was the worst physical sensation of Tressie Bellamy's life. Worse than the standing frame, worse than the trek, worse than the February cold that had closed over her head, because that cold had only wanted her life. He buckled Ren into the carrier without hurry. Then he stood at the foot of the bed, holding the handle in one hand, and looked at his wife with an expression of enormous, patient kindness. "The evaluation's Friday," he said. "Custody's on the same docket. My lawyers say the judge likes to resolve families all at once." He lifted the carrier slightly, a man weighing produce. "That, just now. That's what's on the table. Every Sunday for the rest of your life, or none of them. You saw how easy I can be." He moved to the door and paused, and delivered it in the voice he used for closing, soft as a hotel pillow. "That's what you're giving up if you fight me, Tressie. Not money. You never cared about money. That's always been your problem. You cared about what it builds." "Well," he glanced down at the carrier, "so do I now." The door sighed shut on the sound of his daughter beginning, faintly, to cry. Faye found her 40 minutes later, and what she found she never described to anyone, because some things belong to the patient. She pulled the chair close and sat with her through it, all the way to the floor of it, and she did not say one word about strength or fighting or Friday, because 31 years had taught her the two true things about a moment like this. You cannot fix it, and you do not leave. Her mother came Tuesday, alone. No cake, no consultant, no Luttrell. Cleotha Bellamy, in her good church coat in June, sitting in the visitor's chair, with her purse upright on her knees, like a small defended country. And for the first time in 19 years, mother and daughter in one room with no audience to perform for. "Friday's coming," Cleotha said. "I came to talk sense before it does. Drop this fighting. Let Luttrell take the conservatorship. It's family, baby. Better your own blood managing things than strangers and judges and that lawyer woman. We would take care of you. That's all any of this ever was. You would take care of me." Tressie's voice had grown stronger by the day, and she spent it slowly. "Like family. Mama, I want to ask you one question. I've been carrying it since I was 19. And Friday one of us might say things that can't be unsaid. So I'll ask it clean while I can. The money was mine. Grandma fed that account every Friday for 16 years, in my name, and told me what it was for, and you took every dollar without asking me and without telling her. And then, when I stood in the kitchen, you put me out of the house for asking about it. She kept her eyes on her mother's face, and her mother's face held. Why? Not Gerard's bond. I know the arithmetic. Why me? Why was I the one it was fine to do it to? Truthä Bellamy looked at her eldest daughter for a long moment, and something in her decided that after 19 years and one fake funeral, the truth cost less than the upkeep on the lie, and she set it down between them with a kind of relief. Because it wasn't real, she said. College, companies, that whole life you were reaching for. Baby, I grew up watching women in this family reach, and I buried every one of them tired and empty-handed. Things like that don't happen to people like us. So when I took that money, I wasn't stealing your future. I was spending money that was just sitting there dreaming on a boy who was in trouble that was real. She smoothed her coat over her knee. It was never really yours, Tressie. It was never really going to be. You made everybody feel small for wanting regular things, and then you went off and got lucky. And now you sit up in that bed acting like luck was character. The machines counted the silence. 9 years, Tressie said finally. I scrubbed operating room floors on my knees from 11 at night to 7 in the morning. That was the luck. Grandma believed the reaching was real. That's why the money was mine, Mama. It was the only inheritance in this family, and it wasn't the $12,000. She reached over and pressed the call button. Sign out at the front desk on your way. They log every visitor here. It'll be the first time your name appears in the paperwork of my life in 19 years. I want it on the record that you came, and I want the record to show that when you finally did, it was 3 days before a hearing, and you came to collect. Truthä stood, purse to her chest. At the door she turned, and for one unguarded instant something older than the arithmetic moved across her face, and was managed, and was gone. You always were the strong one, she said. I know what that word means in our family, Tressie said. Close the door. Corinne arrived Wednesday evening with the calendar of the war's last hours, and laid it out plainly, because plainness was the covenant between them now. Friday, 9 a.m., the independent capacity evaluation, a court-appointed psychologist, pass or fail. Friday, 1:30 p.m., the consolidated hearing, conservatorship and interim custody on one docket, one judge, one afternoon. And Friday, 8 a.m., 90 minutes before everything, the document examiner's report on the forged amendment, due by email from Atlanta, contents unknown. The entire question of who legally guarded the fortress landing, the same morning as the question of who owned Truthä Bellamy's decisions and the question of who held her child. Everything, Corinne said, on one Friday. That night, after meds, after the building went down to its night sounds, the aide on rounds found the lamp still on in 214. The patient was sitting up with the legal pad against her raised knees, the pen gripped in her right hand, the recovering one, the one that shook, filling line after line after line, page after page, with the same 2 words, not arguments, not evidence. Corinne had all that. Truthä Bellamy, Truthä Bellamy, Truthä Bellamy. A woman rehearsing, for Friday, the only testimony that had ever really been hers. Her name in her own hand, until it held. Chapter 9. Friday. Her grandmother had believed in Fridays. Every Friday for 16 years, Vashti Bellamy had walked her cleaning woman's money into a bank and fed an account with a girl's name on it, because Friday was payday, and payday was proof, and proof was the only sermon she ever preached. Tressie thought about that at 6 a.m., dressed and upright in the chair, an hour before anyone needed her to be, watching the sky over Charlotte Avenue go from iron to pearl. Everything landed today. It seemed right that today was a Friday. The examiner's report arrived from Atlanta at 8:02. Corinne read it standing up in the parking lot of Select Specialty, and then she read the middle paragraph again. And then she walked into room 214 and laid her phone on the blanket without a word, because some documents deserve to be met in person. The questioned signature on the First Amendment and restatement of the Bellamy Trust is not a genuine signature. It is a traced replication. Stroke geometry, letter spacing, and baseline alignment are identical, point for point, to the exemplar signature appearing on the deed of trust executed by Tracy Bellamy Kilgore on June 4, 2019, in connection with the refinance of the Belmead property. No two genuine signatures produced by the same hand are ever identical. Identity is the signature of tracing. The mortgage papers, Tracy said slowly. He traced me off our own house. He needed a document you'd both signed, that he had legal possession of, with a full, clean signature. Corinne took the phone back. He had one in his own filing cabinet. 11 years I told clients that signatures come from somewhere. 9 o'clock, Tracy. Let's go be evaluated. Dr. Rowell, the court psychologist, was a careful woman with kind, neutral eyes, and for 2 hours in a borrowed office, she asked the questions the law asks when it wants to know if a person still owns herself. The date, the year. Count backward from 100 by sevens. What is this petition asking for? What would it mean if it were granted? What are your assets, in your own words? Who is asking to control them? Tracy answered in a voice like a gravel road, slowly, completely, resting when she needed to, and saying so when she did, because Corinne had told her the truth about evaluations. They are not won by hiding weakness. They are won by demonstrating that you know exactly where your weaknesses are, which is the whole definition of a sound mind. Last question, Dr. Rowell said at the end, and it was not on any form. You've been through a catastrophic event. If the court leaves you in charge of your own life, what's the first decision you'll make with it? I'll see my daughter, Tracy said. Everything else is logistics. The probate division sat in the historic Metro Courthouse on Public Square, high-ceilinged and cold with old marble, and at 1:25 the corridor outside the courtroom was lined with folding chair people. They had come on their own time, in their own cars, and half of them had come in uniform. Bellamy Facility Group work shirts, pressed, name patches level, deshorn from the warehouse, anchoring the row by the door like 60 years of load-bearing wall. Marisol Duarte stood when the elevator opened, and so did all of them, one row after another down the marble hall, nobody saying a word, 300 night shifts worth of witness on their feet. A wheelchair had been arranged to take her from the elevator to the counsel table. No, Tracy said. Tracy, it is 60 feet, and you will burn strength you need. They filed papers calling me a body with money attached. She set the cane, the quad cane with 4 small feet that Ito had signed like a yearbook. 60 feet is my opening statement. It took 4 minutes. It took everything. She walked the marble hall between the standing rows of her own people, the cane and the left leg, and the slow right leg, sweat at her hairline before the halfway point. And no one moved to help her, because Faye Dilworth, walking 1 step behind, quietly promised catastrophe to anyone who tried. Past Luttrell, seated with her lawyer, past her mother in the good church coat, past Rance in the older suit, whose face she watched perform sorrow, then concern. Then, as she kept coming, as the door held open and the judge's clerk stared, nothing at all, the flicker at the outer edge of the left eye, the salesman recalculating a room that had stopped buying. Jared sat on the left side of the aisle, behind Corinne's table. He had chosen a side by geometry, the only language his family had left. Judge Tillery ran a quiet courtroom and an intolerant one, and what happened in it over the next 3 hours was not fireworks. It was arithmetic, laid brick by brick the way Tracy had built everything. The petition claimed a devoted family. The visitor log, subpoenaed and certified, showed the petitioner, Luttrell Bellamy, had entered Select Specialty Hospital exactly once in 5 months, on day 16, with a consultant billing $300 an hour. It showed the husband's visits, stopping cold in the same week. His access to the trust was frozen. A coincidence Judge Tillery invited counsel to explain, and counsel did not. The petition claimed permanent incapacity. Dr. Rowell's evaluation, filed at noon, used the words fully oriented, intact executive function, and demonstrates sophisticated understanding of her own financial structures. And Faye Dilworth's photographs came in one by one, the whiteboard dated in a nurse's hand and answered in a patient's, March into April into May. A mind climbing out of the dark in block capitals, time-stamped, unimpeachable, a diary kept in dry erase because it was the only paper she'd been allowed. The trust amendment claimed her signature. The Atlanta report took 11 minutes to read into the record, and when it reached the words, "Identity is the signature of tracing," Judge Tillery asked to see the 2019 deed and the 2024 amendment side by side and looked at them for a long time, and then looked at Rance Kilgore for exactly as long, and the estate of Tressie Bellamy claimed a cremation. Corinne entered the returns on 14 subpoenas, every funeral home and crematory in Davidson County, 14 certified statements of no record, and then the statement from the Office of Vital Records, no certificate of death, and set beside them the memorial program from Clementine Hall with its garage door photograph, and the obituary, and the company-wide email, and said only, "Your Honor, the respondent's husband announced and memorialized a death he knew had not occurred to an audience of 300 employees and one newspaper, while the woman he eulogized lay under a no-visitors order that he wrote. The petition before you was not filed to protect this woman. It was filed to finish that funeral." At 3:40, Rance's counsel requested a recess, and in the marble hallway made the offer, murmured to Corinne with great sadness, "Everything withdrawn, the petition, the custody claims, all of it, in exchange for a settlement, half the company, quiet dissolution. Everyone walks away whole." Corinne carried it to the small conference room where her client sat grey with exhaustion, hands trembling on the cane, 4 hours past the outer edge of what her body had agreed to. "You don't have to answer it," Corinne said. "We're winning." "Bring him in," Tressie said. "He made me an offer in a hospital bed when I couldn't speak. He can hear this one standing up." They put it on the record because she insisted, and the record is why 300 people know the sentence by heart. "On Sunday you put my daughter in my arms and priced her for me," Tressie Bellamy said, in the gravel voice, slowly, so the court reporter got every word. "You already told me what my daughter costs. Now I'm going to show you what she's worth." "No." Judge Tillery ruled from the bench at 4:55. The petition for conservatorship, denied with prejudice, the court finding the respondent not only capacitated but, quote, "among the more thoroughly documented sound minds this court has encountered." The 2024 amendment referred, along with the entire record of the announced death, to the Office of the District Attorney General for the 20th Judicial District. Interim custody of the minor child, Ren Bellamy Kilgore, granted to the mother, effective immediately, with a home health plan and a guardian ad litem. Transfer to occur no later than 6 p.m. this day. The gavel came down on the best Friday since the ones at the bank. It was Marisol who noticed first, turning to look at the respondent's table across the aisle, at the seats behind it, and finding them empty. Rance Kilgore had left the courtroom during the recess, before the ruling, before the referral, before the word immediately. His lawyer, Ashen, was already dialing him. Corinne called the Bell Mead house from the marble hallway, while Faye brought the wheelchair that Tressie finally took. The house line rang out. His cell went straight to voicemail. His mother's phone the same. 6 p.m., Tressie said from the chair very quietly, her eyes on the courthouse doors. "The order says 6 p.m., Corinne. Where is my daughter?" Chapter 10. What She Signs. The Bell Mead house was lit up like a holiday when the sheriff's deputy rang the bell at 5:38. Corinne on the step beside him, Tressie in the car at the curb because her body had nothing left to spend, and her eyes refused to close anyway. Paulette Kilgore opened the door holding the baby. She was 68 years old, and she had been crying for some time, and she did not ask to see the order. She looked past the deputy to the car, to the woman watching from the passenger seat, and something in her settled, the way a question settles when you finally stop arguing with the answer. "He's gone," she said. "He came in around 4, packed 2 bags, kissed her head, and left me a note like I was the housekeeper." She held the note out to Corinne with 2 fingers, as if it might stain. "I want it on record that I'm the one who handed her over. Write that down somewhere. I believed what he told me because believing it was easier, and I've been doing that since he was 9 years old, and I am done doing it. Now." Her arms tightened once around the baby, a grandmother's full second of goodbye. "She takes 6 ounces at 7. She hates the yellow blanket and loves the seam of it. Go on before I embarrass myself." The note said, "This got bigger than it was ever supposed to be. Tell them whatever helps." 11 words. He had eulogized her at 400. For his own exit, 11. They brought Ren to the car. Tressie had rehearsed nothing, and it would not have mattered. Her daughter came into her arms in the June dark, warm and complaining, 5 months and 1 week old, and looked up at the stranger holding her with her great-great-grandmother's frown, deciding. Tressie did not say any of the things she had thought all spring she would say. She said, "Hey, it's me," in the ruined voice, and Ren Bellamy Kilgore listened to it the way she had, unknowing, once listened through a hospital blanket in a NICU 2 floors below, a woman who would not die, and made her decision, and slept. Corinne drove them away from Belmead slowly, checking the mirror over and over, though no one was following. It was just that some cargo changes how a person drives. They found Rance in October in Scottsdale, Arizona, at a golf resort, under his own name, because men like Rance believe consequences are a service that can be cancelled by leaving town. The indictment out of Davidson County ran to forgery, theft, and abuse of a fiduciary position, and in February his lawyers negotiated a plea, and the sentence, when it came, was measured in years, and the restitution order was measured in everything else. Tressie did not attend. She was told she could give a statement and declined, and gave the court 1 sentence in writing instead. "The record already says everything I spent a year learning to say." She listed the Belmead house in the fall and bought a renovated 4-square in North Nashville, 8 blocks from Lishi Avenue, on a street where her crew's kids rode bikes. Some people asked why there. She never explained it. You do not explain load-bearing walls to people who have never carried anything. In January, she went back to work. There was no announcement. On a Tuesday morning, the folding chairs were still stacked from a safety meeting on the warehouse floor on Charlotte Avenue, and the elevator opened, and Tressie Bellamy walked out of it with the quad cane she no longer needed everywhere, but kept for marble floors and long days, and the building stopped. She stood where the portable stage had been twice. "Most of you heard I died," she said. "Some of you stood in a courthouse hallway on your own gas money to say otherwise. I've been shown the visitor log of my life this year, and your names are all over it, and I know how to read a log." Her voice was still gravel, and always would be. "I'm not selling this company. I was never selling this company. And I am not going to stand up here and make a speech, because we clean hospitals, and there are people lying in those hospitals tonight who need the floors done right, and somebody in this room knows better than anyone that you never know who's listening in those rooms." She looked at them, all of them, 1 slow pass. "So, second shift starts at 3. Let's go to work." Deshawn said later that it was the best speech he ever heard, on the grounds that it was mostly a work order. Ren turned 1 in February in the North Nashville house with a coconut cake Faye Dilworth baked herself, on the record that no store could be trusted with it. Corinne came, retired now for true, having handed her last file to a younger partner with the words, "This one visits." Marisol came with her twins. Ito came and made the birthday girl do squats. Jared stood in the yard for 10 minutes before he knocked. Tressie watched him from the window the whole time, her brother, 35, working the brim of his cap by the gate, the boy the money had been spent on, the only one who had asked where she was buried. She did not go out to him. She had learned the difference this year between a door you open and a door you hold open, and she sent Faye to do it. And when he finally came in, he stood in the kitchen like a man at a job interview, until Wren, from her high chair, threw a fistful of cake at him with perfect accuracy, and the room did the rest. Her mother did not come. Her mother sent a letter the same week, 4 pages in the careful church program handwriting, and Tressie read it once, standing at the kitchen counter. It was not an apology. It was an explanation that circled an apology the way her family had always circled things it could not afford. She stood there for a while with it. Then she put it in the drawer by the stove, unanswered and unburned, because forgiveness was not owed, and doors were not welded, and a drawer is where you keep the things you are not ready to file. The last paper of that whole long year was signed in March on a Friday at a small table in the lobby of Select Specialty Hospital. The Vashti Bellamy Fund. Rehabilitation support for long-term patients with nobody signing for them. Therapy hours, speaking valves, standing frame time, the unglamorous machinery of coming back, funded permanently out of the company that a cleaning woman's Fridays had built without ever knowing it. Faye Dilworth was named to the advisory board and cried and denied it, and the paperwork required the founder's signature, and the founder had practiced. Tressie Bellamy took the pen in her right hand. 14 months earlier, that hand could not close. 8 months earlier, it had filled a legal pad at midnight, shaking page after page, a woman rehearsing her own name like testimony. Now she set it to the line and wrote, and the letters came out steady and whole and entirely, provably hers, the one thing he had bothered to steal, home now, holding. She looked at it a moment. Then she capped the pen and picked up her daughter and went out through the lobby doors into the Friday, where the light was ordinary and the afternoon was hers, and nobody watching the two of them go would have guessed at anything at all, which is what winning actually looks like.